And it's time for this week's market segment. We've got Iowa State University ag economist Dr. Chad Hart in the chair today. And we're going to talk about floods, planting, a host of other things too. Chad, always great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
I wanted to begin with an update on the flooding. And Nebraska got hit hard from the floods. Iowa, where you are, did as well. How have the floods impacted farmers out your way in terms of planting and what their rotations are looking like for this season?
Well, in this case, the flooding, it had a big impact, on our western flank, your eastern flank over there in Nebraska. And it's a little early to say in terms of, okay, what sort of shifts we're going to see through the rest of the year. As we're looking right now on the planting side, in March, USDA released the planting intentions, which showed, more corn, less soybeans. The flooding and the generally wet conditions typically mean that we're going to see some farmers shift from corn back to soybeans because of the planting delays and the pressure building up there. And I think the big thing to watch there is as we go out, especially 2-3 weeks from now, I'll be watching that crop progress report to see how planting is going on there. It's that third, fourth week in April that's really critical as we start to look at corn planting throughout the countryside, because it's in that period of time there that roughly half the crop gets planted.
Yeah, and that leads into my next question about the crop progress report. We're seeing planting for spring wheat. It's about 4% behind the 5-year average. Corn, pretty much on par with averages. Was there anything else from that latest report of note to you?
Not yet. I think that's the deal. With this one, it was the first one on corn. If I remember right, it was the first one on spring wheat as well as we look there. And as you mentioned, the idea is, corn, it's real early, only 2% planted nationwide. And let's face it, the vast majority of that's down in Texas.
Right.
So when we're looking here now, I'm going to argue the critical one's 2 to 3 weeks from now. But we want to watch that, if you will, that progression as we're going forward here. Basically, how well does the southern corn belt get going before we get up here to Iowa and Nebraska and really get into the heart of the production season? But, late April, early May, looking at, historical 5-year averages, like I say, it's that third, fourth week in April that we really want to sort of start to, if you will, sweat the details within the crop progress report.
Gotcha. And Chad, I've read where some folks think we're going to see a fluctuation in commodity prices from the flooding. Some say not so much. Some say too early to tell. What do you think? Give us an idea of where the markets are now and where you see them going.
I think when you're looking at the markets, as far as the flooding is concerned right now, the markets are sort of shrugging and going, okay, there's not much an impact now. I think it comes back to this planting progress and what's going to happen there. In terms of the lost grain that we've seen in the grain bins that we've lost there, it's a great personal tragedy, but it's not a market tragedy. It's not big enough, if you will, to drive markets or market prices to change right now. But if this flooding continues and we do see planting delays really be exacerbated here, then we will see the market price react to the ongoing wet weather. Again, it's not just the flooding. I'm going to argue it's the generally wet conditions across the entire northern corn belt.
So when we're talking about planting soybeans, we've got soybeans that can be planted into June without yield losses. Now, for farmers with fields that still have too much flood debris in them or they won't dry out in time, they could do that, but then when you look at soybean prices, we're about $1 to $1.20 below that break-even point. So does it even make sense to plant soybeans? What do we do in a case like this?
Well, I think in cases like that, it makes sense for farmers to evaluate, okay, how much work and effort do I really want to put in? Do I want to try to rush this land in, or do I take my time, recognize prevent planting is going to help at least protect me on the revenue side here, and manage through this? I think for some producers, if you will, the itch to grow a crop is going to be more than enough that they push forward with some of that flooded out land and try to get it into crop production. Others, and let's face it, some of the damage that we're seeing, especially on the southern end of the Missouri River, sections in Iowa and Nebraska, you're not going to be able to clean that up in time to even get soybeans in. And so we're going to see some land couldn't come in production even if we wanted to. Some land can come back in rather late, and more than likely it's going to have to go to soybeans. And so it's just a mix there of again, what's the person want to do and sort of the economics of what drives them.
Okay. And Chad, back to prices for a second. And I wonder if prices are really even going to improve that much, because I mean, I've read where you've even said that agriculture globally is just so incredibly productive, and that goes for all crops really. So there's just so much supply out there. So from your point of view as an ag economist, what do you think is going to have to happen here?
Well, as you say, the idea is global production is at basically record highs. When you look at global corn and soybean supplies as they currently stand, we're looking at record levels there. We've had an overproduction issue in the markets for the past few years. Even with this flooding going on right now and the worries about plantings, expectations are we're looking at another good set of corn, soybean, wheat crops as we move through this coming year. And, in order for prices to improve, we either need supplies to get shortened somehow, and typically natural disasters are what do that, or we need some demand pickup somewhere along the way. I think the challenge that we're facing right now is that demand, instead of building right now, is weakening in spots. And that's what came out of today's USDA report. When you look at the WASDE, they pulled back, especially on the corn side, when we're looking at usage.
Very good. Dr. Chad Hart with Iowa State University. Thanks again for the insight today. We always appreciate talking with you.
My pleasure.